can't, I'm terrible at the numbers on bills, but it's called the Healthy Vets app, and I think if we could get a card from you, and if you'd even help us distribute it, if we can help get some momentum to get other co-sponsors behind this bill. I visited with two of our representatives out in Colorado that serve on military committees in the House, Congressman Coffin and Lamborn, in order to be able to push for that type of legislation. And so, and just not to correct you, but your service is a big deal.
Have you ever served in the armed forces?
So,
Okay,
Have you ever served in the armed forces?
no, ma'am. No.
Thank you.
145? 145?
Oh. I would like to know, when people that have homes that are underwater or, not able to get financing or foreclosures, what are some solutions to that? Or is there anything that you can do besides maybe have better jobs or making jobs available?
Yeah, I think one thing that we ought to really be taking a look at is some of the mark-to-market regulations that we have out there. Because right now, in regards to some of the banks that are sitting there, maybe in round numbers, let's assume you bought your house for $100,000 that was sitting there. You have been making every payment on time. The market collapses, and all of a sudden your $100,000 home is now worth $80,000. You've been paying on it for, let's say, 4 years. Never missed a payment, but you haven't made up that gap in terms of your equity from $100,000 down to the $80,000. So your loan is now underwater in the eyes of the bank. It limits your ability to be able to have collateral. If people now, if they bought a home that is larger than they can actually afford, and I will blame part of the original Dodd-Frank for that. We were encouraging people, every American needs a home, every American needs a car, and by the way, we'll think about a job. We got that exactly backwards. You get the job first, you build up your credit rating, you go down to the bank, you buy a home that you can actually afford based off of your income to be able to achieve. Through regulatory requirements, we actually, we've all got to take personal responsibility at some point, sitting there. That a lot of people were basically encouraged through the regulatory environment to get homes that were far more than they could actually afford. And then with interest rates moving, collateral being what it is. But I think for those homes, and something that I'd like to be able to look at is in terms of the mark-to-market regulations for what I would label as a performing loan, meaning you've met all of the criteria, you have performed as agreed. I think we'd be able to work out some different type of mark-to-market regulations so that if you wanted to be able to take out a loan to add on to your house or to be able to send your kids to school, that you are not penalized. And part of this will get into the banking regulations end of it because our small community bank, I just met with a small community banker over in Del Norte, frustrated as heck because under the current new Dodd-Frank rules that are in, our small community banks are being held to the same criteria as the Wells Fargo of this world. They don't have the ability to meet all of those regulatory compliance issues that are there. They simply do not have the resources. And the very example I gave to you is when that collateralization drops and they have an examination by the feds coming in to be able to look at the health of the bank, they will take that loan that you've made every payment on and they will move it into what's called a non-performing asset. When it's moved over to a non-performing asset, even though you continue to pay the bill, the bank cannot take those payments to profit. As a result, their capitalization drops. They have to then recapitalize the bank, and we're putting a lot of our small community banks at great risk because they are the ones that have made these small loans to our local folks. And so we've got some real issues with Dodd-Frank that is certainly not only access to capital issues. Congressman Perlmutter and I've actually put in a good piece of legislation. It's called the CAMS Act, Capital Access to Main Street. This is more in the business end of it. This is where it will allow our small community banks to be able to look at a 7-year window of profit and loss statements and balance sheets as opposed to a 1-year snapshot that is currently required under Dodd-Frank to be able to make good banking decisions, to be able to free up that capital. And then, when we're talking about getting people back to work, when we can start to create those capital investments, get a regulatory environment and some stability so that people actually know what's coming down the road, we're going to be able to create jobs, and that's going to be some of the best stability we can create, getting people then to go back and buy homes. So,
140.
I'm Tom Lubisky. I live in Alamosa. I'm a Republican. My wife is a Democrat. You know, I reiterate, I did all what the gentleman talked about with veterans. I spent 2 years in German warfare. I was at 14th Street, Maryland. And before I could even go into the hot area, I spent a good 3 to 4 months taking shots before I could even go into the hot area. So I realized that people, this veteran thing is just sick. It needs attention. I would like to say this. In 1973, I believe it was that year when Nixon put a freeze on. So people just couldn't go out and charge 1%, or 2%, or 5%. Why don't they reenact something like this? Our dollar bill is pathetic. Just pathetic. And I'll tell you what, my family has been in business on Main Street in Alamosa 70 years. Think about that. 70 years. Well, we did have to close one part of our operation down. But I'll tell you what, the small businessman is struggling. They are struggling just like the small farmer. But the small farmer, they get subsidized, but the small businessman does not. I have some real concerns for this. I really do. But I appreciate your effort in going to all these communities, talking to people out in rural America. Because boy, as far as I'm concerned, rural America is all by itself. And I'll tell you something, it is just pathetic as far as I'm concerned. You have reiterated about this traveling back and forth, but just making a living is something to behold anymore. And I thank you.
well, I appreciate your comments. You know, I serve on 3 committees, Natural Resources, the Ag Committee, Small Business Committee, and I chair a committee, Small Business versus Energy, Ag, and Trade. The #1 job creator in this country is small business. And unfortunately, the tale that you just told of a family that's been able to hold on to a business and be able to operate that for 70 years is slowly becoming a thing of the past. Our small businesses create 7 out of 10 jobs right now. Here's part of the problem that they face. Right now, and this is an average nationwide, for small businesses, they are paying, in terms of regulatory costs, $10,585 per employee, just in regulatory costs. This is money that you aren't able to put into inventory. This is money you aren't able to put into advertising. This is money that you're not able to be able to put into sprucing up your building and maybe draw in more customers. So those are dollars, and make no mistake, no one is calling for no regulation. Many of our friends always want to take something to the very extreme that's out there. And I always like to be able to get the tale, you know, at the beginning of the 1900s when we started building cars. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's worth, by the way, going into Alamosa. They've got a Model T car show that's going on. Some great old Model Ts that are driving around town right now. But in the beginning of the 1900s, when we started building cars in this country, there were only 2 automobiles in New York City. Only 2. And they ran into each other. Okay? So a stoplight is not a bad idea. Nobody is calling for no regulations. But we've got to be sensible about this. As a nation right now, we are paying $1,750 billion per year in regulatory costs. And I'll take you back a little bit to what I mentioned in the opening. We passed some good legislation with bipartisan support through the United States House of Representatives, and we hope, and I visited with Senator Udall, I've visited with Senator Bennett. I think our senators have some frustration that they aren't seeing that legislation brought to the floor. Let's debate the issue, let's amend the issue, let's take it to conference, let's get the job done for the American people. That's what's important right now. We've got to be able to move this forward. We just passed with bipartisan support again out of the House of Representatives. It was